Not out loud anyway.
She thought I heard it.
Well, they saw the look on our faces like,
Are we doing it? And she went. It was great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that song. It's just so wonderful. Well, I was looking at what I was going to talk about today. We have belting. We have the wonderful Cinco de Mayo is coming up. We have Mayday, which is celebrated all around the world in various ways. And I thought, because I thought about that Mayday, Mayday, Mayday that you hear when planes are going to crash or when ships are sinking. And I'm sure that Chris can help me in pronouncing it in French. It is
Mayday.
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 Very good, very good.
In French it means help me.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's, just to get an idea of where that came from. And you say it 3 times, so it won't be confused with something else. It could be confused with hay. It could be confused with things. So it's always the Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And I thought, wow, we think of that in a time of crisis. And how many of you have ever been in a time of crisis?
Never.
Yeah. Annie has never been in a time of crisis. Wow, I'm so glad to hear that, Annie. And what happens when we get into crisis, we say, God, help me. Okay, that's our Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We need help here. And we usually spend more time praying when we need help.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's something about that. No matter, I know atheists and agnostics, when they're in a time of help, they go, oh God, please help me. It's like it's something that's built into us to pray. And so, but asking God for help isn't always easy. How many times do you think, like, I can handle this myself? I don't need help. I don't need help. I don't need help. And when I was thinking of that, it reminded me of that wonderful, wonderful story about the guy who was drowning. I'm sure you've all heard it, but I love it. And so there he is, he's drowning, and he said, God, please help me. He just knew God was going to help me. And this guy comes by in a rowboat and says, get in the rowboat and take it ashore. And he goes, no, no, no. I prayed and God's going to help me. A little while later, this woman comes by on a speedy motorboat and says, hop in and I'll take you over to the bridge and you'll be safe. You go, no, 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 I asked God's going to help me. And then you hear from a helicopter, hey there, I'm dropping the line down, grab it and we'll save you. And he goes, no, God's going to help me. A little bloop, right as he goes underwater. And he gets to heaven and he says, God, what happened? You didn't help me. He said, what do you mean I didn't help you? I sent 2 boats and a helicopter. And that's the way we are. We expect a bright, shiny light and the voice of, Earl White Jones going, I'm here to help you, Instead of looking at all of these wonderful people who are here to help you. Do you realize you're in a room of helpers?
Mm-hmm.
How many ministers, reverends do we have in the room? Yeah. You are surrounded by help. And the reason that they have that name, minister or reverend, is because they're helpers. They chose that path. But instead of saying to somebody that sits next to you, I'm going through a difficult time. Could you help me? You're standing there and saying, okay, God, why have you abandoned me? You didn't get the splinter out of my finger when I asked you to. Well, probably the person you're sitting next to is an RN. We got a few of those in here who would gladly help remove the splinter. So think about that. It's okay to ask for help. Because you all, have any of you ever attended many different churches? Yeah. And what were you looking for? Were you looking for God inside the church? Were you looking for people inside the church? Were you looking for a community inside the church? Or were you trying to find yourself? All of those are perfect answers. Every one of those works for what you're going through in life. So when you think about that, I can go through life without yelling, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. I can get my life on that even keel where I can help myself or ask others to help me. And every time you think of it, you say, but who is God? And each one of you has your own picture. Somewhere in your head, in what we call your third eye, you can see whether God is a male, a female, whether God might be called Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, whatever God's name, that is very sacred and very special to you. But isn't the person sitting next to you part of God? That's the person that you are right now identifying with, is that person. And so think about that. That divine love is a daily answer for each one of us. And sometimes we spend our whole life trying to find it outside of ourselves. But it's that connection that we have. How many of you were told as you grew up that God cared about what kind of grades you got? God cared about how much money you made. God cared if you finished college, and God for sure knew what type of person you ought to marry. And you go, at what age did you go? I don't think God really is concerned about those things.
Well, God was really interested in what I wore.
And he talked to you through your mother. Yes. And you might have even been taught sometime that we're completely separate. That different countries and different skin that different colors of skin kept us separate. Yeah, yes, Jimmy.
I just heard something from one of my clients, which I thought was beautiful. She said, God is not a micromanager.
Yes. Yeah, but you are. You know, you do want to.
Well,
And sometimes, yes, David.
I was told by my uncle Bill, my favorite uncle, he goes, David, God is your cousin.
God is your cousin.
That messed me up for years.
Yes, it would. And for me, some of my early Sunday school, it was felt like God was wrathful. God was going to get me. God would. And I used to walk down the street looking around and seeing where God was. You know, if God was watching, God had to be pretty close behind somewhere. And I was always kind of checking it out. And so as we get older, we realize that that love is the God energy. That love is that essential fact of who we are and how we connect with whatever you want to call the divine. If you want to call the divine creator. If you want all of these words that we have for the divine energy. Some people call God energy. Some people call God love. And for me, that essential fact of God being there isn't something I doubt. I doubt a lot of other things. I'm always amazed that 2 and 2 still makes 4 every day. You know, it's like, what do you mean? That everything else changes. As you can tell, I'm not a mathematician. And so when you think of the knowledge of who God is a different type of seeing. It's a seeing with your heart. It's a seeing with your third eye. Think about that. How do you see God? He's not walking behind you. She's not following every move. This being, this energy, doesn't sit in your car with you unless you ask. That Mayday, Mayday, Mayday is not about just in times of grief, in times of helping, where we want somebody to help us. That feeling of God is with us all the time. So when you think of it, it's energy. And my experience is that it's kindness, hope, joy, happiness. That is the feeling of love that I have. And you look at it, how does it make me feel? It makes me feel good. And I feel sorry for people that come in and say, well, God wants me to, and I don't want to. Have you ever heard of that? I should be doing this. And I need a Kleenex. I found one. See, God works it. Yes, many mysterious ways. Okay. And when we ask God for a miracle, you ever ask God for a miracle? And it wasn't answered, and yet life got better? what happened there? It's almost like that energy flow, it was still there, wasn't it? It didn't disappear. But it's like, is this really where you want to go? I feel that the divine energy of God knows better what's good for me than I do. And every once in a while doubt it. How many of you have ever done that? And God, I don't think you really know what's going on. Are you sure you've got this, God? You know? And then I go through whatever's happening, and afterwards I go, wow, that was one of the best learning experiences I've ever had. How many of you have noticed that learning experiences quite often are not helpful at the time? And afterwards, and afterwards you go, wow, I really learned something from that. And then you said, why did I have to go through that? Because some of us are so thick-headed, we're not going to get it any other way. That's right. And it's just kind of like that holy 2x4. It just comes and goes, wham! You go, okay, now I got it.
Yeah.
But if you talk about God on a daily basis, and every day, say, thank you for being there. Then when it comes time when you really think that miracle is important, you're going to get an energy that you go, wow. I hear stories every day of people. Something horrible happens and all of a sudden there's a rescuer. Somebody they hadn't counted on rescues them. How did that rescuer know they were in trouble? Somehow, whether you want to call it a spirit guide, you want to call it the Holy Spirit, whatever, somebody touched them and said, Dottie needs help. And they responded. And each one of you here has that energy. This is a spiritualist church. It's because you feel things. You know things. You get things. And you might be saying, oh, I'm going to sleep in this morning. I don't think I want to go to church. And this little voice said, you told Dottie you're going to come bring a cake. God, are you really telling me that it has to be a chocolate cake?
Yes.
And yes. That's what I'm saying. And you go, how did I get that message? It's that connection that you have. It's that connection that says, yes, I'm here. Because when you ask God for a miracle, it's a parting of the mist. It opens up a space for things to happen. Many times that energy you have around God is just this heavy mist of, I can't see you, I can feel you every once in a while. But when you get to that point of saying, okay, God, I've been talking to you, I've been listening to you, and today I need you to show me something that I can take with me and I can believe. And you'll find it. But how many of you are in touch with people who've passed on? How many of you have felt that energy? For me, my friend Byron is a blue feather. And I have found blue feathers on the 32nd floor of a hotel. And trust me, their pillows did not have blue feathers in them. And I'm talking to somebody about something, and all of a sudden there's a blue feather. I've had my grandmother comes through like a whiff of Evening in Paris cologne. I don't think they still make it, but I know grandmother's there. My grandfather comes through and knows how Cool Clear Water, that song, Cool Clear Water, was his favorite song. We lived on the desert. That was his favorite song. And everybody in my life comes through in a certain way. And usually when I need a miracle, they show up to let me know that life is good, but the other side is really very good too. And I want to share something that happened, and for those of you who went to England with me were aware of this. We were in Glastonbury, and we were looking at the Glastonbury, is it castle? Glastonbury Abbey. Thank you very much. And I'm walking around, and all of a sudden this spirit of a little boy, about 10, started talking to me. And I said, what's your name? I said, Kevin. I said, Kevin, you're not in body anymore. You need to go be with God. And he said, no, God hates me.
God what?
God hates me. I said, God hates you. How come? He said, because I was born a bastard. And I said, who told you God hates you? And he said, the priest. And they talk to God, so I'm no good. And I said, no, everybody's loved by God. He said, not me. And I said, how long ago did you die? And he said, well, I never really learned my numbers too much, but there were only 3 numbers in the year. That's a long time. But that Abbey was there since 700 or whatever. And I said, okay, Kevin, I'm going to let you go be with God. And I know that God is going to love you and be there and with you. And he said, I'm scared. I said, well, come with me. So I'm walking down the street going, okay, Kevin, Corky, all the people, they're used to this, you know. Okay, so I get up in my room, 2nd story, and there is a butterfly on the curtains. And the butterfly is red, white, and blue. I've never seen a red, white, and blue butterfly before or since. And I looked at that butterfly and it was dying. Have you seen a butterfly die? They're kind of all folded up, their wings are all folded up, and it's and I said, Kevin, this butterfly is going to take you to God. And we went outside and I put the butterfly on a twig of a tree. And I said, Kevin, can you feel the butterfly? He goes, yes. And I said, follow the butterfly. It's starting a new life, and you're going to go with it and meet God. And I'm standing there, and Corky said, did he do it? Of course he did. Of course he did. And he left. And I thought, that was a miracle in so many different ways. And that miracle made everybody in the group kind of coalesce and feel better about, as a spiritual being, that's what we can do. We can make it easier for people. Like this morning, talking about Donna's father, and he is making his transition. And being able to talk about it because we know where he's going is a better place than certainly being paralyzed. Completely paralyzed. His organs were failing because they're paralyzed. What a horrible prison to be in. And yet we as spiritual beings can talk to God and say it's time for him to go. It's time for him to leave. And as you do that work, and that's why I had called Janet up here, because she does that work daily. And I just give her so much credit for being able to do that. Because it's difficult, but somebody needs to be the giver of the butterfly to folks when it's ready for them to go. But many people, they carry a load that's called anger, frustration, grief, and they can't let it go up to God. They have to hold on to it. One of my favorite ladies, Lena Horne, said, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. Isn't that true? That how many of you seen people with such a heavy load? Heavy, heavy load. And they're carrying something you can't imagine. And yet over here is a person who's screaming because they have a sliver in their finger. But for each person, that load is very, very difficult to handle. And that's where you as helpers and healers step in. You are there to listen, but you're also there to grab the tweezers and a needle and a little bit of antiseptic to get some things out. And you all have that capacity to do it. Start admitting that when you feel like you're crashing, sinking, burning, it's okay to say Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. To friends that are there for you. How many of you have friends that are there for you? How many of you have friends that really don't give a darn? They're still good friends, you know? I was talking to somebody and I said, yeah, I have this really good friend. And they said, well, how good is she? I said, I have really good friends that if my car broke down in San Jose, they would be there for me. I've got some really good friends that if my car broke down in Reno, they'd be there for me. I've got a few friends that if I was in an accident in Chicago, they'd get there. And I have one friend, if something bad happens to me in New York, she by golly will be there. Now, what's the difference between those friends? It's the degree to what they are capable of. It's not, any of them are worse or better. And so when you look at your friends in life, some of them you know are going to be there for you, and others are excellent friends, but they can't. They don't have the capacity to be. But there's still an embodiment of the God energy. So think about, when you're struggling, ask the person next to you. Maybe you can help. And remember, it doesn't have to take 2 boats and a helicopter before you get the punch that, you know, God works in such very, very mysterious ways. What do you do to help people? Yes.
I just wanted to chime in something that I thought was interesting. On NPR, Terry Gross Fresh Air was speaking with a woman who is the voice of the flight simulator caution statements. So as the pilots are learning how to fly, they're directed by a male voice, but if they do something wrong, the female voice comes in, pull up, pull up, pull up.
Wow.
And the question, well, why? I mean, that sounds fabulous. Why? And they said because in an all-male environment, the female voice comes through on a completely different channel, and it's noted. It's not part of the noise. It's noted.
Wow.
Wow.
It's like your mother.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say that, but yeah.
There's something there. And I think the timbre of the voice too.
Yeah.
You know.
All the aspects of that femaleness. I mean, you could probably make a whole long list of what's associated with that.
Right.
That was for April.
And just lead us to water and roll that.
But for you, how many of you, when you know somebody's needing something, offer to help?
Nice.
Okay. Don't call me if you're in the hospital. I am not going to show up. I am a lousy caregiver. I'm a good healer. But as I mentioned before, I have stepped on people's oxygen cords. And
You're good at telling other people.
I'm really good at telling other people that like and are so good. There are people who like being nurses. You know, I have passed out by somebody suggesting they were going to take my blood. You know, they didn't show me anything. They just suggested
Don't come to the hospital.
You know, and if you throw up, my kids were never sick.
Mine either.
I told them, if you throw up, you clean it up. No, you never threw up. I don't know what they did when they left home, but when they were there, it was no way. Because if you do, then you're going to have to clean up mom, too. And yet, I can counsel people and listen to people and be there for them.
But you also send other people that are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a whole list of people who have a background in nursing, and I will send them and say, hey, so-and-so needs help. And they go. But that's finding out who you truly are. Okay? So think about that.
That's kind of like my job was like that. I was a dispatcher.
Mm-hmm. Oh, as a dispatcher, yeah.
Yeah, and dispatch people to different situations.
Being able to have a roster, either in your head or in your phone, of people who are good. You know, I was in my shower this morning and I went to shut it off and have you ever had that happen when it goes drip?
Oh, because the washer's dead.
And I turned it and I turned it and I get all the way 5 feet away and it goes drip. And I turned around and I went back and I tightened it a little bit more. This time I got all the way into the hallway and it goes drip. Okay, Richard Allen, I'm calling you to come fix my faucet. You know, I have somebody I know can fix faucets.
Yeah, I call him too.
Yeah, he's really good if you want to. So, but having that roster, instead of me getting frustrated and getting out whatever wrench you take plumbing off with, I found somebody to call. So that's what life is about. I don't say, God, you've got to help me. My faucet is leaking. I know that there is somebody there that is a helper. So think about it.
Well, God did his job. He introduced you to Richard Allen.
That's true. I mean, that's what I'm
Tony, at least
do is push the button that Richard gets the message,
Yeah.
but not anymore.
But think about that. Sometimes Mayday is asking the person next to you for help. And sometimes it's allowing God to work through. And we have some things I'd like to pass out, and you don't have to read them unless you find one. Kirk is passing out, and read one of these if you want to. It's just something that I'm throwing around here. Yes?
I find myself when I'm stressing out on something really badly, I just say to myself, actually to God, put my feet on the right path so I don't make myself worse.
Put your feet on your right path so you don't make yourself worse. And if you find one of these that you like, just read it. If you don't worry about it. It's when you have doubt. When you have doubt.
I wanted to talk to you.
Mine said grab me on yours.
The other thing is, even if you're the one, the caregiver that's always called upon and there's a time you can't, to trust that the divine will put someone else there. You know, that whole, oh, I should have been there.
Oh,
I
yeah.
could have, you know, it's like that's all just story. And it's like knowing that you know, we do have a community. Not one person has to do it all. I think
Exactly.
it's
True.
so important because that's
Exactly. It's so important to and as a caregiver, knowing when you can say no.
Yes.
Yeah. And have you ever said to somebody, okay, I'll put it in God's hands? You know, it works. Okay, I'm not there for you right now, but I'll put it in God's hands. And so think about how did you do that. Anybody have one they want to read? Yeah, Christine.
In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. That's Robert Frost.
Annie.
Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or a greater benefit. Napoleon Hill.
Who is that from?
Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill. Dottie?
We must embrace pain and burn it as fuel for our journey.
Yeah.
Kenji Miyazawa.
And on that one, pain is your friend. It is your ally. Pain reminds you to finish the job and get the hell home. Pain tells you when you have been seriously wounded, and you know what the best thing about pain is? It tells you you're not dead yet. G.I. Jane.
Yes, Laura.
Mine says the difference between stumbling blocks and stepping stones is how you use them.
Very
I
good.
love that.
Yes,
great.
Ron.
If you aren't in over your head, how do you know how tall you are? Unknown.
Yes.
I learned there are troubles of more than one kind. Some come from ahead, others come from behind. But I bought a big bat. I'm all ready, you see. Now my troubles are going to have trouble with me. Dr. Seuss.
All right.
Yes, Karen.
Courage doesn't always
Stand up.
roar. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. Mary Ann Radmacher, or something like that.
Yes. Chris, like this one.
If it's not exactly like you thought it would be, you might think it's a failure. What about the spectrum of colors in between? Sarah Evans.
One who gains strength by overcoming obstacles possesses the only strength which can overcome adversity.
All right.
Albert Schweitzer.
Adversity is a fact of life. It cannot be controlled. What we can control is how we react to it.
Yep.
Unknown.
That's it.
Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact. William James.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Colleen.
Obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. Michael Jordan.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much. Oh, Glenn, I'm sorry, Mr. Hand.
I ask not for a lighter burden, but for broader shoulders. Jewish proverb.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, are you ready? Yes.